For 10 years, no one could read it. Then the document became public, and what it contained surprised many. This is not the letter of a rebel. It is not the proclamation of a protester. It is the spiritual testament of one of the most powerful and faithful men of the Italian church of our time. And in that will, there's a sentence that, alone, is worth more than 1,000 controversies. In this video, we'll read it carefully, word for word, and you'll understand why it weighs so heavily. Let's start with the facts. On June 16, 2026, Cardinal Camillo Ruini died at the age of 95. 2 days later, during the funeral in St. Peter's, celebrated by Leo XIV, his spiritual testament was made public. He had written it in Rome on June 3, 2016, and titled it Thanksgiving and Request for Penance to God and His Brothers. Pay attention to this detail because it changes everything. The will is from 2016. Ruini wrote it during the era of Pope Francis, but he asked that it remain sealed until his death. To understand the weight of these words, you need to know who Camillo Ruini was. Born in Sassuolo in 1931, Ruini was no ordinary cardinal. He was John Paul II's great strategist in Italy. President of the Italian Episcopal Conference from 1991 to 2007. Vicar of Rome for almost 20 years. The man who led the Italian church in the cultural battles over life and family. It was he who launched the Italian church's cultural project, who defended life and the family when the country debated abortion and artificial insemination. For a generation, the name Ruini meant only one thing: a church that was present, firm, and distinctive. In short, not an outsider, not a traditionalist from the fringes, the very heart of the ecclesiastical establishment. And that's precisely what makes his testament explosive. Just think about this. Ruini, along with Joseph Ratzinger, was one of the most widely listened to voices in the church at the end of the 20th century. When he spoke, it was the most solid and faithful part of the hierarchy that spoke, not the critical wing, the center. Let's get to the document itself. For the most part, it's exactly what you'd expect from a spiritual will. Ruini thanks God for his long life, for his call to the priesthood, and for his family. He humbly confesses, in his own words, the weakness of my faith, and says he has always been tempted. He's an elderly man who, facing death, comes to terms with God. No self-promotion, no self-assertion, only gratitude and penance. And then, towards the end, comes the passage on Francis's pontificate. And this is where we need to be precise, because it's very easy to misinterpret. Ruini begins with loyalty, and it must be said right away. He writes, "When Pope Francis was elected, I was delighted and immediately supported him. Today, I am also delighted and thank him for his extraordinary missionary zeal." Do you understand? There is no hostility. There is a cardinal who declares his loyalty and his esteem for the Pope. Keep this in mind, because it is the key to everything that comes next. But then comes the sentence that changes everything. Ruini continues, writing, "I must confess, however, that I find myself in an uncomfortable situation, certainly not for personal reasons, but because I struggle to understand certain orientations." And here is the decisive sentence. "Some orientations that seem to me to reopen wounds that after the council had healed with difficulty." Let's reread it slowly. Wounds that, after the council, had barely healed. And now, says Ruini, some trends seem to be reopening. What wounds are you talking about? The fracture that, after Vatican II divided the Church between those who saw it as a break and those who saw it as continuity. The liturgical, doctrinal, and disciplinary divisions that for decades have torn communities and families apart. This is the point that no major media outlet has fully covered, because Ruini admits two things at once, and both are enormous. The first, that after the Second Vatican Council, wounds had truly opened within the Church. This isn't the opinion of a traditionalist blog. It's written by John Paul II's right-hand man. The second, that those wounds, so painfully healed, are now being reopened, and that something in this context is certain orientations of the current pontificate. Pay attention to the words Ruini chooses. He doesn't say errors. He doesn't say heresies. He says, "I struggle to understand." It's the language of a son, not a judge. And that's precisely what makes him so powerful. You can dispatch an attacking enemy, but a faithful man who has served the Church for 70 years and who on his deathbed confesses his discomfort that you can't ignore. And the question every Catholic should ask himself is this: if even Camillo Ruini struggled to understand, how many other pastors keep quiet about the same discomfort out of prudence or out of fear? Because Ruini chose to speak only in death. He sealed those words away for 10 years. He entrusted them to his will, that is, to the only moment when no one could ask him to remain silent. It's a detail that speaks volumes about the climate within the Church today. The most measured criticism from the most authoritative man could only emerge after his death. And it's not an isolated signal either. In the same days, theologian Manfred Speaker openly criticized Leo XV's latest encyclical on a point of moral doctrine. Different voices, but a common concern, sweeping the cultured and faithful segment of the Church. Then there's an image that, in itself, sums it all up. At Ruini's funeral in St. Peter's, it was Leo XIV himself who quoted the Testament in his homily. The words about hardship were read in the heart of the basilica, before the altar of the confession. And there's an echo worth heeding. A few days ago on this channel, we saw Leo XIV tell the Society of St. Pius X that they reject some points of the council. Now, a very loyal cardinal admits that precisely after that council, wounds were opened that would be difficult to heal. Two very different voices, from opposite angles, point to the exact same sore point, the council and its legacy. So what should the faithful do when faced with this will? Not turn it into a weapon, nor bury it in silence. He must do what Ruini did, remain faithful, and at the same time have the courage to be truthful. He must love the Church enough not to pretend the wounds don't exist. Ruini, after all, didn't leave an indictment. He left a prayer, a thank you, and a request for penance. And within that prayer, a single, sober word of truth: discomfort. Because wounds, when hidden, don't heal. They become infected. And the first act of charity toward the Church is to look them in the face, as did an elderly cardinal who no longer had anything left to ask for except God's peace. What do you think? If you liked the video, comment Amen. God bless you.